Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Healthy Living with Chef AJ. If you're new to listening, I'm Chef AJ, the author of Unprocessed and the creator of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. If you'd like to find out more about what I do, please go to www.eatunprocessed.com. I'm very happy to announce my guest tonight. I'm a big fan of his work. It's Roger Gould, MD. He is a board-certified psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and former head of community psychiatry and outpatient psychiatry at UCLA. And he is a leading authority on adult development and emotional eating. Dr. Gould published a book in 2007 called Shrink Yourself, Break Free from Emotional Eating Forever. In both his book and his online program, Dr. Gould suggests that the powerlessness people feel over their cravings to eat when they are emotionally upset is a cover-up for a deeper sense of powerlessness in areas or layers of their lives not directly connected to eating. By examining one's sense of powerlessness in other areas that are identified, Dr. Gould claims one can end emotional eating in other forms of uncontrolled eating forever. Well, that's a very mighty claim, Dr. Gould, and I hope you can convince us that that can be done. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Healthy Living.
Thank you. Welcome to be here. I think forever is quite a long time, so
How about for the next 10 minutes?
Right.
Well, Dr. Gould, I had the privilege of meeting you a couple of times in person. You spoke at one of my events and one of my classes, which was absolutely wonderful. One of the things I love about your book, and if you listen to the show, you know I've said this to a few other authors because we just had Kathleen de Maison on the other day who wrote Potatoes, Not Prozac, is that the title of the book really hooks me in. I found your book many years ago on Amazon. I didn't even bother to see what the reviews were or what was about. I loved the title. My brother's a psychiatrist. The book is called Shrink Yourself, and the visual on the cover was like somebody, lying on a psychiatrist's couch, but it was like a tape measure and an apple. And I got the play on words, like shrink yourself, meaning like your size, getting it smaller, but also analyze yourself. And congratulations on such a great title. I loved it. It got me to buy the book. I now recommend the book to my clients, and I even use it as a teaching tool in my programs.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
So was it an easy title to come up with? Did it just come to you one day in the shower, or did you have to deliberate on that for a very long time?
I don't know. I can't quite remember how it all came about, but when it happened, I decided that was it. A lot of people said, people, they'll get the double entendre, but do people really want to shrink yourself, be your own shrink?
Yep.
And is the word shrink degrading to a psychiatrist or a psychologist? I don't think so. I think it's all in good fun, to tell you the truth. So right. It turned out fine. I like it.
I like it too. Well, my brother's a psychiatrist, and his license plate does say shrink. So I think it's a great title. And as much as I love your book, and I do, and I recommend it, what I like even better is your online program at www.shrinkyourself.com, because that really helped me even more. I'm a little bit dyslexic, so reading isn't my thing, but that interactive online program, it really just it hit the nail on the head. It really enabled me to break free forever, in my case, of emotional eating. Talk a little bit about how you created such an amazing program and why, in fact, these programs have been proven to be just as effective as in-person therapy.
Well, actually, let me take that and tell you about what we are now doing, because that program has been up for 6 or 7 years, and it is a program that parallels the book, and it is all interactive, and it's been very successful. But we decided to redo it, and in about 2 weeks, we're going to launch with a new Shrink Yourself.
Oh, I'm excited.
And this Shrink Yourself, in fact, I'm going to offer it, and you can maybe repeat it at the end of the podcast for people who aren't here right now. But the application that we just created is about 98% done. There's 2% of polishing we have to do the next couple of weeks before we launch. But if anybody listening would like to use it, they can go to www.sy, standing for Shrink Yourself, champions, that's a plural, .com. And then they go to sign up and ask if they will have a guest code, And if they just use the word podcast, they'll get a 2-week free membership.
That is incredibly generous of you. Thank you so much, and I encourage everyone to do it because it's such a worthwhile program. How do you figure these things out? Because they are, and compared to going to in-person therapy, these are so incredibly affordable.
Well, this is $9.95 a month, so it's quite affordable.
Exactly.
And what we're doing is we're moving one more step closer to making what I call digital therapy. I'll tell you more about that. I'll use you as an example. If you'd come into my office before, what would we do?
We'd talk.
Exactly. Or more accurately, we'd have a conversation.
Yes.
And what would be about?
About my eating, probably, and why I overeat, and how I couldn't lose weight. Maybe not right now, but when I would have started your program.
Right. So we would talk about some part of your life that you want to change.
Yep. Okay.
Or improve, or make your life better. Or you would start with some symptom of anxiety or depression or feeling stuck. But in the course of whatever you started with, we'd end up talking about how your mind works, how you think, how you assess reality, how you make decisions, how you solve problems, and your own self-worth and your own self-knowledge. All that's part of the conversation, because we'd be talking about you, and you'd be talking about your issues, and I'd be talking back to you, asking you questions. But in the end of each hour, it would be more than just a conversation, because if it was just a conversation, you could have that with anybody and you wouldn't want to pay my fee. But the conversation has done some work because it's helped you think about things in a different way. So what we've done is we have taken the topic of emotional eating, which I'll talk about more later on, and we've broken it down so that you can into 3 large categories. One is what's going on in your mind when you have a strong craving to binge or eat too much. And you can have a conversation with a computer program that is helping you sort that out. The second part of it is if you have a strong craving, it usually starts with a bad mood. So the computer program then helps you analyze and look at what's going on in your mind when you have a bad mood that makes you feel so bad that all you can think about doing is eating. And then the third part is what we call mastering stress, which is if you're in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood because something's bothering you, and what's bothering you is some part of your life that you're worried about or you can't figure out a solution to.
Sure.
It's sitting there in the back of your mind. Now, I think that all makes what I call common sense. But those 3 pieces make up the whole issue of emotional eating.
How did you figure? I mean, it sounds amazing. I guess you must have seen lots of patients in practice to figure it out and to simplify it this much.
Well, this is the product of 40 years of work, but the last 7 years focusing on this particular subject.
Well, may I ask how you even got interested in this sort of specialty of emotional eating in your practice? Because I believe you worked at Pritikin at one point as well, and you had a program at UCLA. So how did this become your interest?
Well, it evolved. My initial interest was bringing general psychotherapy into an educational model that more people could make use of at a cheaper price so that we could sort of spread the knowledge, if you will. And we created a program called the Therapeutic Learning Program that we've used in community mental health centers, outpatient centers, and psychiatric hospitals. But during the course of that, they were used in eating disorder units and substance abuse units. And I began to learn more about the addiction issue of what goes on in a person's mind when they feel they have to have something that they know is not good for them.
Yeah, that's my level. I am very interested in that as well.
Yeah, because that's the elephant in the room, and that's one of the big issues when it comes to food and weight and what's called yo-yo dieting. What's yo-yo dieting? Well, it's basically people their motivation comes together. They make use of the kind of information that you would teach them or they learn elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They join a support group. They lose weight. They feel better. 3 or 4 or 5 months later, something happens in their life that they can't quite handle. They feel stuck. They begin to feel powerless. They're in a bad mood. They start eating because it makes them feel better. And now they put on the same 20 or 30 pounds that was so hard for them to take off before.
And sometimes more.
And oftentimes the research says that every time you go through that cycle, you actually add 10 pounds to your base weight.
Oh, boy.
You start out in a new position.
Wow. Well,
but it tells a story. It tells a story. It tells a story that people can lose weight and control their relationship with food when they feel highly motivated and are not overly stressed.
Right. So stress. Well, I believe I read in your book, Shrink Yourself, something to the effect of that if you cannot manage your stress, you'll never be able to manage your weight. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, except you have to add another piece to it, which is that some people get highly stressed and they lose their appetite.
Interesting.
Some people are highly stressed and they never. But anybody who has learned along the way that food gives them a shortcut relief when they're feeling bad is in a vulnerable position to use that again.
Sure.
Not built in, it's not genetic. It's something that either accidentally you learned or you watched other people do it or is part of your culture when you're growing up. But basically, the old saw about when a child hurts himself, say, okay, let's give him a hot fudge sundae or a treat.
Sure.
I mean, everybody does that. The issue is that when it's used too much, it becomes like an addiction.
Mm.
And I've heard people. Some people say one of the most common triggers for eating too much is when people are bored.
Wow, I didn't realize. Yeah.
And if you ask a person, why are you eating when you're bored? And their answer usually is, well, what else would I do? Why wouldn't I?
I could think of like 20 things to do. That never was my trigger, but I do think that's I believe you when you say that.
Well, that's the point. The point is that rationally, you think about it, and people understand that in fact, it's not a justification for eating too much. It's a cover-up and an excuse for a compulsion to eat too much.
Mm.
And this issue of having a compulsion to eat too much is what I call the elephant in the room.
Yep.
It's the big issue that nobody really takes on seriously enough.
Yeah. I think the question on everybody's mind is, how do you define emotional eating?
That's easy.
Okay, good.
Easy. Emotional eating is when you eat too much in order to control your emotions, and you do it against your best intentions.
Mm.
That is, it demonstrates a conflict you have with yourself. If you eat too much and you want to eat too much and you don't have a conflict about it, then you're not feeling guilty and angry about yourself, fine. You have a choice. It's a free choice.
Sure.
But if, in fact, you do that and you must do that and you don't want to be heavy and you intend not to and you spend an effort not to and you still do it, then you are demonstrating the emotional eating addiction or habit.
And how is emotional eating different from food addiction, or maybe they are not different, or how are they related?
I think they're the same. Sometimes people think of food addiction only when a person has a particular food that they're addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, it's a compulsion to do something that you intend not to do.
Okay.
Most important part of that whole description is that it's about a conflict you're having with yourself.
Right. Right. Is mindless eating similar? I mean, or is that completely different than this?
Mindless eating is simply the symptom of it. The mindless eating, again, means that you know the correct way to eat. I mean, there's a lot of correct eating habits. You eat reasonable portions. You eat slowly rather than rush. You don't stuff yourself. You stop when you're full. And you are mindful of what you eat and look for healthy food.
Yeah.
It's in everybody's best interest to do that.
It is. It absolutely is. You said you've been in practice for 40 years, so I don't know what the statistics were 40 years ago, but now what we see is that 2/3 of Americans are overweight, half of those are obese, and that 1 out of every 3 children under the age of 18 are already obese. Was it this bad 40 years ago when you started out?
No, of course it wasn't.
Okay. So
the growth, which is, go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you think made it worse? Because my question is, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Robert Lustig of UCSF, who talks about sugar and the bitter truth. He's a pediatric oncologist, and he has like 2-year-old patients that are already morbidly obese and diabetic and with liver failure. And my question is can a 2-year-old really be emotionally eating, or is it possible that our food supply has changed so much and the foods that we're eating now is going to still make us fat and sick whether we eat emotionally or not?
When you're looking at an epidemic like this and you're looking at a population, no one explanation is the explanation.
Okay.
There's no question, and you have to look at subpopulations. There's no question. If you've got a 2-year-old who has a genetic issue and an insulin response and is obese, it has nothing to do with emotional eating. There's no connection to it.
Okay.
If you look at the fact that certain foods are toxic and people have different constitutions and respond differently to different food combinations, you spend so much of your life looking at what is a healthy food.
Mm-hmm.
People are writing about it and working on it. There's a difference between healthy and unhealthy food. All those are factors. Poverty and the fast food is a factor. Fast foods and fat foods and sugary foods that are tempting people to do it more. Subcultures are factors. There's many factors, and maybe the biggest factor is the fact that the population is under a greater degree of stress.
Well, then how do we manage stress? Well, I mean, it's funny because you said that some people say they eat because they're bored. And when you said that, I laughed because I could think of 20 things to do other than eat when I'm bored. But stress, that seems to be a big trigger for a lot of people.
Well, bored is considered a stressor for some people.
I did not know that.
Being angry has become a stressor for some people.
Okay.
You're getting to the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is, how does one manage to live their life in such a way that they can be able to calm their own mind? They can continue to have perspective. They can solve the problems that everybody has, the challenges of daily life, the issues that happened in your family, the health issues, the mortality issues, the work issues. These are all part of life. These are what cause stress. So the issue is, how do you handle these problems? How do you have and achieve an attitude which is problem solving, in which you don't exaggerate and make problems that weren't there, that you see things in proportion, that you're not overly sensitive, that you are not overly judgmental of yourself or somebody else, that you're not living in a wish world, that you're constantly disappointed because you're not making things happen, that you're realistic. All the things that we're talking about in terms of the mature mind that everybody has to learn how to have.
Mm. So how do we acquire these skills if we haven't learned them yet? And some of us are, getting up there a little bit.
Well, now let me tell you more about this app.
Great. Oh, you haven't. See, isn't that funny that nowadays, whatever the problem is, there's an app for it?
Right. The part of this, part of learning how to manage stress is to take a problem that you're dealing with and break it down into parts and continue to think about it long enough that you engage your intelligent, rational mind to find an effective solution for it. So in the mastering stress component of this app, this is when I call it an app, what it is, it's a program that can be used on your desktop, your device, or on your cell phone, or all at once.
Is this similar to your online program, or is this totally different? And what's it called?
It is the online program reorganized so it's much more like a therapy session.
Okay.
Sessions, and it's much more available. For instance, it's available to work on a craving anytime you have a craving, to work on a bad mood anytime you have a bad mood, and to work on any of 350 different stress conversations.
I know that we have at least one listener out there that still doesn't have technology. We have some older people. So is there any other way for them to get this kind of help if they just simply don't have an iPhone or an iPad or a computer? And what happened to the Pocket Hunger Coach? Because we had a lot of questions about that they're not able to install it right now.
The Pocket Hunger Coach is incorporated into the first portion called the Zap Craving. We put the Pocket Hunger Coach out there to trial to see how it would work, and we've had 3,000 uses of the Pocket Hunger Coach, and 90% of the people who used it said that it stopped a binge or a craving in mid-act. So
that's a really great success rate.
Yeah, so that's actually prompted us to go ahead and create this new app. The new app has immediacy to it, which is it's right there when you need it. The Shrink Yourself program was 12 lessons a week apart.
I remember but it still was really great. I remember I did it once a week on every Sunday.
Yeah, well, and it's still good, so I'm not knocking it. I love it, but this is, for instance, once you use any one of those sections I told you about, and you make observations about yourself, we actually create your journal to remind you of what you learned. And every time you use it, your journal gets more interesting. So you can stop and just look and read your journal and get the insights that you would have otherwise gotten if you sat down and had a conversation with someone like me talking to you about this subject on a personal level.
If sometimes just talking to people can help, even if it's not you, and a lot of times I find that this disease seems to exist in isolation, that people don't reach out, whether it's to the technology for this program or to you or to a friend. They, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think talking to people, anything that helps you put words into what you're feeling and helps you sort out your thoughts and finishing the conversation so you'd come to some conclusion. You know, again, there's a difference between, hopefully there's a difference between a professional conversation and a casual conversation with a friend. Some friends are very insightful. Some friends can be very supportive. Other friends have their own view, which you may not agree with. And it's useful. It's useful if it helps you think through your own thoughts and finish your conversation. What food does, eating or compulsion to eat or binges, is it stops your conversation with yourself. When a person begins to get the craving, it's strong, you get tunnel vision. All you think about is the food and where you're going to get it and how much you're going to eat and when you're going to get it. You forget about your problems. You forget about the things that are really bothering you.
And that's sort of the reason, isn't that people do it, and they to forget, like the same reason I would imagine that people drink is so they don't have to think about their problems, but then they're actually creating more problems, I think.
It's exactly the same problem as drinking.
Wow.
Exactly.
Except that I think it's a little bit more, I don't want to say, socially acceptable, I guess, you know. I mean, it's also easier, like if you have a job, and your boss yells at you, and if you went to the vending machine to get Cheetos, you'd still have your job. But if you went to a bar and drank vodka on duty, you know, it'd be a bigger problem, probably, is what I'm guessing. It's so socially acceptable to overeat, and to eat foods that don't nourish us that it almost is like everybody's doing it, so to speak.
Well, that's one of the big problems. So that's what we want to make inroads into. So, for instance, let's take that example. You're at work and your boss yells at you. You know, now tell me, you, AJ, or someone else in the audience, what are the 20 things you could do other than getting a snack?
I could go for a walk. I could excuse myself, go to the restroom. I could call somebody. I could take some deep breaths. I could close my eyes for 5 minutes and meditate. I could go in the bathroom and scream. I could cry. I could quit my job. I mean, I could think of a lot of things.
Sure, exactly. You could also do the kind of things that I would also recommend, which is you could say, well, what really went on right here? Why did he yell at me? Was it something I did? Was he in a bad mood? Was there a misunderstanding? Is there something I should sort out? Did he really yell at me, or was I overly sensitive? And was I overly sensitive because something else was going on that was bothering me? And I was loaded up with things and I couldn't take one more thing? And should I just take a break for a while and collect my thoughts? That is, you can think through any incident and sort it out what's happening. And when you sort out what's happening, you can come to a decision about what you want to do about it. If you take each of these issues, this is the mastering stress position, take each of these issues, use your intelligent, rational mind and say, what really happened?
But
what really happened?
Yeah, but I think for the people that are looking for instant relief, that seems like it would take a long time.
I don't think so. I think that's instant.
It is instant. Okay.
That's instant. That is instant. But it requires some effort. And it requires some confidence that you have the ability to master or control your own responses, your own life, and your own situation, and make decisions, that you're not helpless and powerless.
I think that's what it is, a feeling of powerlessness, like you said.
That's what I think. I think it's exactly, which is, but think about it. Boss yells at you, you feel powerless, right?
Right, because you can't really yell back in most situations.
Right. You can yell back if it's your husband or your wife,
right,
or your brother-in-law, but you can't if it's your boss, right?
Right. So you kind of have to stifle it, and then yeah.
But are you powerless just because one option is closed off?
No, you're not. I don't think you ever really are, because you always have the power to change your thoughts.
That's right. By
Yeah.
looking and changing your thought is by simply saying, what's real here? So you're not powerless, but you feel powerless.
Yeah.
And here is exactly the issue of emotional eating. You feel powerless, it's false, it's incorrect, but you believe it so much that you think you must eat in order to get rid of that terrible feeling, because powerlessness is really close to the source of panic.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's the underlying issue of anxiety, powerless to protect yourself. That's why we look for protectors who are more powerful than us.
Mm-hmm.
But being a powerful agent of your own life is the only way to make your life work as good as it can.
When we eat to not feel these feelings, it's not. I mean, we have to keep doing it though. It just it's not a permanent solution. It's very temporary.
Well, that's exactly right. One woman the other day wrote in. Basically, she said, I learned a lot and I'm really good, but at night, between the time I put the kids to bed and I go to sleep, the eater comes out. And I start grazing, and I start a little bit, and then I have to eat more, and then I have to eat more, and I have to eat more, and I have to eat more. You have to eat more in order to quiet your thoughts. What happens between the time you put your children to bed and the time you go to sleep? Well, that's probably the only time during the day that you have time to think about your life.
Yeah, because otherwise you're busy all day.
Right. So now you have time to think about your life. You're thinking about your life, and you think about, and I don't know what it was for this woman. This is, this is something she wrote in, but it's a good example and it's familiar to me, which is, what could she be thinking about? She could be thinking about her job.
Mm-hmm.
She could be thinking, is she successful enough? Is she making enough money? She could be thinking about her husband. Does she like being with him? Where is he? She could be thinking about an argument they had before, and she's still angry at him. She could be worried about her children. She could have a parent who's sick. All sorts of things. Life. Does eating help her deal with any of those issues? No, it only shuts off her mind.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what people are looking for, to shut off your mind. I remember a long time ago, a yoga teacher used to say, "It's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you."
Yes, I think that's it. I've heard that many times, and it's a good one.
Yeah. Well, so do you feel that this is something people should just attack right away, or does it help if they switch the food? Because I remember you saying once in person, you say nobody really emotionally overeats on broccoli. And that's true for the masses, but at least the people in my program that are giving up the real addictive foods, like the high fat foods, the high salt foods, and the refined carbohydrates like the sugar, flour, and alcohol, they still don't know how to not overeat, so they're overeating on things like bananas and potatoes, and so it's not affecting their weight really, they're still losing weight, and it's not affecting their health. But is it bad to let them do that, or should we just get right into it and say no more overeating?
Well, that's a good question. Let me think aloud with you about the whole thing, which is, if a person chooses to eat what they want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a free choice, and they say, look, I like the feeling of being full, feels good. I want to eat a lot, and now I figured out how I can eat a lot and not gain weight. I've solved my weight problem. Okay, so now that's, who can argue with that? Now the second question is, and this is the heart of your question, which is, if you eat that much on a regular basis, are you using it to shut off your mind?
Probably, I would say so.
Well, and I think that if the person sorts it out and is honest with themselves, and they say, that's what I'm doing, I'm using it to avoid dealing with my life problems, then it's not good. If, in fact, they work on their life problems and they're on top of things, and they're not denying and avoiding, and they're not getting headaches and feeling depressed and having anxiety attacks, then okay.
No.
One
of the things I hear a lot from my clients who are often engaging in emotional eating is the part they can't stand is the feeling of being out of control. So something happens, like you say, and instead of doing the steps that you recommend, they'll turn to food. And if somebody just ate like one cookie, it wouldn't matter. But then they eat one and they can't stop, and then that's the feeling of being out of control and having to eat the whole box. And that's the part that scares them and really seems to bother them more than just the eating of the cookie, the feeling of being out of control.
Well, I think that's a very good observation. I remember a case a long time ago, but a woman was in the mall in the Valley with her 16-year-old daughter and her 16-year-old daughter's friend. Excuse me just a minute. And her daughter was being kind of bratty. And it was a Saturday afternoon, and she was embarrassed by the whole thing, and she couldn't stop her. And so she bought a box of donuts, and she sat there and ate the whole box of donuts. And I said, well, why did you do that? And she said, well, what else could I do? And when she said what else I could do, it was like, I am powerless to deal with my daughter, even though there are things you and I could think of and others think that she could do. I'm powerless to deal with my daughter, but now I substitute being powerless over food because I have to eat all these donuts, and I am angry at myself for being powerless, out of control. So they're all part of the same stream of events, all related to I have an issue, I'm not dealing with it in the best way. A very intelligent woman, very accomplished in many different areas, has good rational thinking processes. She could not apply to the issue with her daughter. So what you're talking about in terms of hating to be out of control starts because of how much they eat, starts with the feeling of being out of control, which moves them to eat in the first place.
Interesting. And yet some people would never think to do that. My naturally thin husband would never think to overeat or eat. I mean, how can we be so lucky and have that kind of brain? I mean, there are people that just don't have this problem, and then and don't understand those of us that do.
Well, that's because your husband never got hooked on the shortcut to feeling better through food.
Oh, I love that. Getting hooked. What you just said was brilliant. These people got hooked on the shortcut to feeling better through food. I love it. Thank you.
You can say the same thing with alcohol and drugs.
Sure.
I have a problem. I feel powerless. I drink, I eat, or I smoke, or I take drugs. Yeah. These are all shortcuts. They're quick, they work, and then they cost you a lot.
Yeah. Boy, that's thank you. I mean, that you've said a lot just with what you've said right there. And people really aren't aware sometimes that that's what they're doing, because it's actually become like a habit.
Well, it is a habit. Again, I'll go back to why we created this app. We created this app so that when you're in the midst of a habit, if you have only a small amount of motivation to learn about what's going on, you can interrupt this habit for 4 minutes and look at what's going on in your mind and begin to think. You know, it's a big problem. There's a mass of people out there who have this issue, who have to learn how to think more clearly about their lives and their reality, and it's going to be only for their own betterment. So everyone can't go to a therapist, and everyone can't go to groups, and everyone can't read a bunch of self-help books and apply them. But this is an opportunity with this electronic age to bring this information in a form that people can use it that's practical.
I cannot wait to try your new program because, as I said, I got so much benefit out of the original one. I had already lost most of my weight. I was about 10 pounds higher than I am now, but I was still emotionally eating, even though it was on A+ foods, and it was bothering me. And doing your program, I realized that there was just a very few specific situations that I was doing it in, and it sort of brought the unconscious into the conscious, just doing, those exercises. And then now I'm really aware of those particular situations that are where I could potentially overeat, and I'm just, I can prepare better. And so it was really helpful to me.
So, AJ, let me return the compliment to you. You just made a brilliant statement.
Oh, thank you.
And the brilliant statement you made is because it's the same statement that Freud made.
Oh, wow.
In 1900 to 115 years ago, he said the process of psychoanalysis or psychotherapy is to make the unconscious conscious.
Wow. Me and Sigmund, go, baby.
You and Sigmund, AJ and Sigmund.
I would love to have him on the podcast, but I think he's too dead right now, See, he had some interesting addiction problems himself, didn't he? Wasn't he an avid cocaine user?
He used cocaine for several different years. He started it as experimentation, and then he stopped it.
Oh, good for him that he was able to stop. I'm so interested because I'm a big fan of Nathan Pritikin, because I basically am on the diet that he recommends, which is mostly plant-based, even though I'm 100% plant-based and extremely low fat. I don't know if you actually met him or worked at one or many of his centers, but weren't you the one that told me that people would pay something like $10,000 a month for this program and they'd still go out and eat burgers like during the program?
Oh, yeah, I'm the one who told you that story because I remember that place in Santa Monica, right off the, just south of the pier in Santa Monica, the Pritikin Institute. It's now a hotel.
Oh.
Right next to Shutters. It's a hotel that's right next to Shutters. I forgot the name of it, but that used to be the Pritikin Institute. And people would come from all over the country. I think they were paying $8,000 or $10,000 a month to live there, get food, have classes. I would go there and give lectures and consultations. I had an office, a couple blocks away from there on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica. And I remember leaving the premises and watching them walk down and watching them walk into the hamburger shacks a couple blocks away after they just got through either with a meal or learning all about it. And I said, that's it. That's what addiction is all about. Intellectually, you know of it, but the compulsion is there. And unless people actually get into their own conflict, which is everything I'm trying to get people to do, they can't resolve it. You can't be good for a while and then go bad for a while.
Sure.
Reminds me of the classic story about the young woman who's 30-some pounds overweight. Her best friend is getting married 6 months later, and her ex-boyfriend's going to be at the wedding. And lo and behold, she starves herself, and she gets those 30 pounds off, and she looks great at the wedding. And she's hoping that the ex-boyfriend is really hurting that he missed her. It didn't quite work out that way. Ex-boyfriend brings another woman. she's disappointed, and she puts the pounds right back on.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's
You're motivated, a lot of work, a lot of effort. You can lose weight, but if you're losing it for the wrong reasons and you don't really face this mechanism, this habit,
it will always come back and then some.
right? You have to deal with the fact that you use food for relief to control the intensity of your emotions.
Sure.
Because you're feeling powerless and you're not powerless, so it's a total waste.
Yep. Gosh, I sure wish I had known you while you lived in California. It would have been so fascinating to have been exposed to this sooner. I love the whole concept of addiction. If I had more time in my life, I'd love to, be one of these certified addiction specialists that I keep hearing about. You had said that a lot of times people take the weight off and they're good for 5 months or however long, and then something happens in their life and then they go back and they put it on. And I wanted to ask your opinion about this because I certainly haven't seen as many clients as you have. But one of the things I noticed, Dr. Gould, is at least with these people that I seem to attract that are serious food addicts and serious emotional eaters, is it's almost like that when life is good, they're almost waiting for the other shoe to drop. So to get back into their addiction. So in other words, when everything's hunky dory and their marriage is good and their job is good and they have enough money, and then they're working a program like mine or one of the other ones, if they go and go and binge, it would be like, well, what's wrong with you? Everything's great. So it's almost like that when something bad happens in their life, a family member gets sick, their dog dies, they lose their job. It's almost like they're not happy that it happened, but now they have a legitimate excuse to go back to the addiction because, what could, like you say, that lady in the mall, what else could she do? I think that's their thinking, but then people won't be as hard on them while they're suffering. Could you please address your thoughts on that?
The social part of people not being so hard on them when they're suffering, I think, is correct.
Mm-hmm.
But you said something else which I thought was interesting and to the point, which is that when everything is going right and it's all falling into place, some people are still worried that when something new happens, they won't be able to handle it. That is, they're lucky everything is going right. And they're now hoping and wishing that it continues to go right. And there's a basic attitude which I think people have to adopt in order to stay as healthy as possible psychologically, which is there are always going to be bumps in the road. You can wish and want everything to be perfect, but it's not going to be perfect. Everything is changing all the time. Things have to be adjusted. Things have to be accommodated to. Choices have to be made. So if you have a good sense that you are the agent of your own life and that you happen to be lucky now, but if something happens, you'll take care of it. You'll work it out. Then when something happens, something just happens and you deal with it. But if you don't have the confidence that you are the agent of your own life, then you are thrown for a loop when something happens because it's not supposed to happen. Your wishes aren't powerful enough to stop it from happening.
Is the agent of your own life sort of like that internal or external locus of control that I hear about?
Yeah, it's the internal locus of control,
Oh.
which goes back with, again, the common sense way of looking at the life cycle. When you're an adult, whether you like it or not, the responsibility for living your life is yours. You make the decisions about getting married or divorced or having a child or not having a child or going to work or not going to work. You're the one who makes the decisions and you live with the consequences. So if that's true, and if life is unpredictable, then you have to take an approach which is good. If there's a bump in the road or something comes along that's tough for me, I'll work on it till I figure out how to solve it, how to come to grips with it, how to accommodate.
I think it's hard for a lot of people to be adult. You have your first book dealt with that a little bit, didn't it? Transformations?
Yep. It's all about the evolution of what I call the illusion of safety, so that you start out with the illusion of safety, which is a young child. The illusion is that your parents are going to protect you forever. And when things get rough, they're always there to bail you out. When you get to be a young adult, you begin to learn that you have choices and freedom, but you also have responsibility, and that you have to shed the illusion of safety in order to really understand that you make your own safety by making good decisions. And you make good decisions by thinking things through and learning from experience and adapting along the way. Your real safety comes when you do the work, whatever the work is that you need to do in terms of making a relationship work or a job work or a situation work, by being the agent of your own life and taking life on and dealing with the reality as it comes up. That's the very best way to have a good life and to be stress-free as much as possible.
Sure. If this is too personal, don't answer, but did you ever have this problem with emotional eating or overweight? I've only known you a couple of years, so I don't really know. Or is this something that you just got into because so many of your patients had this problem?
It's something I got into.
Okay.
I'm the same weight I am right now when I played high school football.
Wow, lucky you. So would you say that everybody that's at least 10 pounds or more overweight is eating emotionally at times?
No, I don't think so. Well, at times everybody eats emotionally.
Okay, but would you say then the majority of people that are overweight are emotional eaters, or what else is causing them to be overweight or obese if not eating emotionally, just eating too much?
Again, if you take it and you break it down into its constituents, there are some people who have been raised on all the wrong foods.
Sure.
And if they were active one period in life and they end up with a desk job and they're more sedentary and they don't keep up with their exercise and their ability to handle calories diminishes or changes with age, they gain weight.
Yeah.
They don't have to be emotional eaters, but they then have to wake up and say, wait a second, if they want to control their weight, what are the factors here? Is it exercise? Do I have to change from my high-fat diet to a more reasonable diet? Do I have to change my portions? And if they wake up and they do that, then it's just a matter of changing their eating habits. And if they're motivated to do that and they're not emotional eaters, they can do it.
Yeah.
If food has not become the way that they control their emotions and deny their problems.
Yeah, it seems to be a very popular drug for a lot of people.
But if you sort it out, you can still be overweight and then wake up and learn about it and control your weight for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's getting hooked on food as a drug. I think that's what you said before.
Yeah. That's what
food is a drug. If food is a drug, then in your mind's eye, when you're feeling bad, it's the short route to relief, and it's only an arm's length away, and it's socially acceptable. It's pretty tempting.
It sure is. And it seems like we sometimes surround ourselves with like-minded people, meaning that are also using food as drug.
Well, there's no question about it, because if you're overweight and you're embarrassed by it and can't control it, then you don't like being around thin people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, when you get thin, you sometimes have to get new friends.
That's right, because if you're eating healthy and taking care of yourself, you are creating a conflict for the person who hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, interesting.
Because it's almost like a message saying, look, you could have this too.
Yeah.
But that does what I say, that creates an awareness of the conflict that the person is having. If they then look at you and say, hey, you're right, I could have this too, then you've tipped the balance in the right direction. If they run away from you, it's like saying, yes, I could have it, but I'd have to give up food, and I don't want to give up food.
Yeah. Some people are not ready. Some people will never be ready. We have an interesting question from Carolyn who says, how do you deal with unsupportive relatives who sabotage you, especially those that live with you?
How do you deal with them?
Yeah.
Unsupportive relatives, like maybe a mother-in-law or something?
Sometimes even I find that husbands I hear in my program will sabotage their wife's effort. Maybe unconsciously they don't want them to get slim or something. But how do you deal with anyone who tries to sabotage you when you're trying to do right and eat healthy and they clearly are not on the same page?
I think, again, if you're the agent of your own life, mm-hmm. and you are convinced that you're doing the right thing, you make a statement to that person and say, look, you may not like this and you may not support this, but this is what I think is the right thing for me to do for me. I actually think it might be the right thing for you too, but you're not ready. You make your statement.
That's great. Yeah, because then like you say, it's like you have some power in that when you say it like that. You're not a victim.
You're not a victim, and it's a simple statement of fact. I think if there's a theme about everything I've said today, it's about it might sound complex, but the concept is very simple. There's a reality out there, and if you are responsible for dealing with that reality to make your life better, then you deal with that reality. The unsupportive relative living in your home is a difficult problem, no question about it. May need some finesse, but it's a problem to be addressed, not a problem to be a victim of.
Right. Excellent. We're almost out of time, but I do have a couple more questions from the listeners. So if you want to just give short answers, it's okay. Jeanette wants to know how one deals with I've been good all week, so I can have a cheat day syndrome.
I think if you're good all week and you have a cheat day syndrome, I personally don't think that's so bad, depending on what you do on your cheat date.
Sure.
If you undo all the good work of the week, then it's ridiculous.
Right.
If you're saying, you know what, I like chocolates, and I've got a bank in here of calories I can have, and I'm going to take 300 calories for my chocolates on my cheat dates, fine.
Sure.
I have chocolate every night.
Well, good for you. You're just like Dr. Dean Ornish. I hear he does the same thing, and he's also one of my a doctor I admire. Gail wants to know how you deal with the I'm so tired from work, so I deserve to stop at a fast food restaurant to reward myself syndrome. Like using food as a reward, but bad food as a reward, because I don't think anyone agrees that eating at McDonald's is going to be good for you.
Right. So that's just an excuse. I mean, you have to take it for what it is.
Yeah.
If you're so tired from work, then you have to figure out what you can do to relax. But using it, saying, therefore, I should go to McDonald's and have a double cheeseburger, I deserve the reward of that. That seems to me as an obvious excuse in order to have that, because you're feeling exhausted from work and therefore powerless, and you want that hamburger to feel better. And I would say you should look for better ways of feeling better.
Right. That's important. Looking for other ways to soothe ourselves and reward ourselves other than food. And there are many out there. There's meditation, there's bubble baths, there's petting dogs. I mean, I can think of so many, but people it's like the default is food. It's like bad mood, go to food. It happens so quickly.
That's exactly the issue, and that's why one of our programs is called Fix My Mood.
Yep.
On this app. It's all about when you're in a bad mood, looking at why you feel so powerless and what you can do to reverse that.
This is so exciting. I cannot wait to join this new online community you have. You said something earlier when we gave the example of the boss yelling at you, and you said, well, maybe you are overly sensitive. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because last week we had Kathleen de Maison, the author of Potatoes Not Prozac, on the show. And she said that in her opinion, all food addicts are overly sensitive. They're highly sensitive people. So if you're wired that way, is there a way just to not be so sensitive all the time? If this is really what's one of the reasons that you are turning to food? Because of your high sensitivity?
Well, I agree that a large percentage of people are very overly sensitive. They're overly judgmental about themselves. They take other people's response to them as criticism too easily, and then they beat themselves up and become their own worst critic.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a syndrome when all three parts go together. And again, you have to look at what is going on. And if you are falsely accusing yourself, you have to stop and think, wait a second. So-and-so said such and such that implied that they didn't like me. They didn't like me because they think I am X. Am I X? Is that really the reason they didn't like me? Is this something I'm carrying with me from a long time ago and overreacting to? And stop and sort it out. That's the only way, case by case, piece by piece. Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's endless, and I don't want it to sound that way because, in fact, if you kind of attack your sensitivity, your judgmentalness about yourself, and your self-doubts, enough times and enough incidents and come to a new way of thinking, the sensitivity goes away.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. Dr. Gould, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you or find out about your work? What is the best website that we can refer them to?
Well, the Shrink Yourself website is still the best way.
www.shrinkyourself.com.
And in about 2 weeks, the new program I just described to you will be on Shrink Yourself.
And all of our listeners, Dr. Gould is generously offering a 2-week free trial. So could you please tell us again how we can get that 2-week free trial on your new?
For the program that will be up on Shrink Yourself in 2 weeks from now is now up in our kind of pre-launch program for what we call champions, people who want to use it, try it, give us some feedback about it.
And they go to www.sychampions.com, and then they're going to put in the word podcast.
No, when they go to sign up, they go to a sign-up page, mm-hmm. and it'll ask them if they have a guest code.
Guest code.
And the guest code is podcast.
Great. Thank you.
They can tell other people, not too many, but if you want to tell other people, they can do the same thing.
I will be happy. I definitely want to tell all the people in my community. Dr. Gould, thank you so much for your work. I really think that what you do is largely overlooked in the medical community and the dieting community, because I think it's not only an important piece of the puzzle, I think it's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle as far as long-term weight loss and management is concerned, because until people deal with this piece, like you say, they're always going to rebound and gain the weight back and gain more. And I'm just so blessed that I found your work a few years ago and that I met you. And thank you for what you do to really enlighten us on this very important topic that really is going to help people if they do the work.
Right. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Dr. Gould, and thank all of you so much for listening to Healthy Living with Chef AJ. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Good night, everyone.